Hi there, and welcome to the Broken News. And in this episode, I wanted to talk a little bit about the two-party system, political system in the United States, and the prospects of forming a third party in the United States, a third popular party. Now, we have other parties. They never really get anywhere, the libertarians, the Green parties. They are kind of making a little bit of traction, but it's not because of the ideas that they hold so much as it's just a rejection of the main parties. People are just fed up with it. So I wanted to take a look at the two-party system. Why do we have a two-party system? Why has it dominated politics in the United States since 1852? We didn't always have Democrats and Republicans. We had, before then, during the early parts of the United States, you could almost look at the states as like countries on their own. And they're kind of working together to form this federal kind of thing. So the political parties were, by and large, not the way that they are today. They were more about who should have more power, the states or the federal government. So it was kind of along that lines. But later on, once everything kind of settles down, and those states that did seem like countries before, now they're more cohesive and more unified, and it makes more sense to have a federal authority because everyone's kind of on the same page. So that settles out, and then you start getting into the nitpicky stuff, the moral issues, and then that turns into the Democrats and the Republicans, and the platforms for each side has flip-flopped throughout history. So in the late 19th century, what you would have thought was a Republican would have looked more like a Democrat and vice versa. And then after the Civil Rights Movement, later on, you start to see that flip so that the Republicans represent a totally different idea than what they did before. And the same is true for the Democrats. So we have two-party system because that's all the sides there are. There's two sides to the coin in politics. Anything else is usually an outlier or an edge case that doesn't really line up with popular philosophy. So really the popular philosophies are one giant thing, and then they divide along lines, and you get the Democrats and you get the Republicans, and that's pretty much all you're going to have. Anything other than that is just a combination of those two things into a third amalgamation. The problem with that is, what I'm going to get into here in just a second, is the appeal to authority. Now, when I say an appeal to authority, what I'm saying is whatever that may be for an individual in determining what's right or wrong. So historically, the appeal to authority has always been God or the Bible. Your clergy, your minister, those people would tell you what was right or wrong. And then later on, humanist philosophy became a little bit more of a popular idea, and the humanist philosophy has always been around, and it kind of had an uptick in the Renaissance and an up and down here or there, because a lot of people connotate a humanist philosophy with the hedonistic philosophy, and they're totally different things. So if you don't know what humanism is, check it out and learn about it a little bit, because it's going to help describe the Democratic Party. They're more aligned with a humanist appeal to authority, whereas the Republicans are more aligned with a divine or a supernatural appeal to authority. One of the best examples of how this plays out is with pro-life and pro-choice. Pro-choice is a humanist perspective. It's reasoned through the moral sphere of the humanist philosophy, whereas with the Republicans, the pro-life is more a prescription from God. So there's no way to certify either. You can't certify a divine authority. You can't certify a humanist authority. So really it's just an opinion, and where you have opinions and there's no real way to say who's right or wrong, that's where you clash, and that's where you have divisions. So wherever Republicans and Democrats don't agree, it's usually centered in who is the appeal to authority. Are we appealing to God? Or are we appealing to humans? Where those two appeals agree, we have a just law. Like, most people who have an appeal to God will say, let's not kill one another. God says don't kill one another. So people don't. If you're a humanist, you say don't kill one another because it's a destructive force and it doesn't help people persist. So those two perspectives align into something that everyone can agree upon. So the appeal to authority doesn't really matter in that case, because in the end, we all agree that murdering is bad. Of course, you have outliers and edge cases, but by and large, no group or segment of the population is saying, yeah, murder is a just thing. There's no authority that says we can't kill one another. So where those perspectives disagree, that's where you get the parties. And if you form a third party, what you're doing is you're combining those different appeals to authority. So within a third party, you might have some parts of the platform that are backed up by an appeal to the divine, and you have parts of the platform that's backed up by an appeal to the humanists. And because you mix authorities, it undermines everything. So you really can't, it doesn't hold water, because it's just pieces of things that don't fit together. Because the appeal to authority has to be common. It has to be consistent. That's what gives it its weight, because otherwise it doesn't have any way to certify it. So we will not have a third party in the United States. There's a reason why two parties has endured for 150 years or 160 years, whatever it is now. Because that exact reason. Why? Who is the authority that's saying this is what's just, this is what's right? I believe in the humanist one, because you can have a moral sphere, it's well reasoned, it's logical, and wherever it kind of falls out of that sphere, it's an individual choice or an individual opinion, and that's stuff that's not left to the state. That's your individual choice. So we can't really make laws about those things. So it really does help you kind of parse out what the state, what the people can do in terms of saying this is the law and this isn't. That can come out of a humanist philosophy. So in that regard, I support the democratic side, but here's the problem with all of it altogether. The Democrats and the Republicans don't make an appeal to the same authority that we think they are, whether that's humanist or the divine. The authority that these people make an appeal to is the almighty dollar. It's greed, it's money, it's power, it's avarice. That's who their authority is. So whatever laws that our politicians are making, I can promise you that they are designed to put people down so that a small class of people can be raised up. And you can look back and see this is how it is. It's like the cannabis laws are a great example of that, because it's arbitrary by and large. It's interesting how our leaders will take the flimsiest science, the flimsiest hack medical experts that there are with no research, and make these laws that have been on the books for people's lifetime. And then when the pandemic comes along, no one wants to listen to science, no one wants to listen to experts. Climate change, no one wants to listen to science, no one wants to listen to experts. We need more time, we need more research before we can make a single law that's going to help. But when it comes to cannabis, because it's the almighty dollar and greed and avarice and power and putting people down, that appeal to authority actually works, and that's why the laws got created the way that they are. So the average person, you might be a humanist, you might be devout, it doesn't matter, because your leaders they're praying to a different God, and that's where their laws come from. So no matter what you want, if you can't shape your idea into something that's going to get the power class some power and money and prestige, then you don't have a chance of having that happen. So that's what a third party is. It's a way to say we aren't going to have laws that are based in greed and keeping people down. We want laws that liberate people and allow us to go on with our lives and not be oppressed by the government and locked up in a system. That's what a third party would be. But it's not going to work, because from this graphic you can see that your third party is just going to be a combination of the two parties that you don't want to be a part of anyway. You have Republicans who are Democrats. You have Democrats who are Republicans. If you have a third party, you're going to have a Democrat Republican in that third party saying that they're a third party. So it doesn't really help. It doesn't help. What we have to do is somehow hold people accountable to a platform that represents the people. And you can't even do this because the leaders of the Democratic Party and the leaders of the Republican Party, they shape the platform, and that platform doesn't represent the people. It doesn't. The Democratic platform is a watered down version of what everybody was excited about at the beginning of the run-up to the nomination for the Democratic ticket. And then once it actually got there and we got Joe Biden, the platform had changed. It wasn't as progressive. It looked more like a Republican thing. So you could see that this happens. It gets taken over, and then the people never really have a voice. So a third party is not going to work. The reason why we have two parties is because the people make appeals to different authorities, and there's no way to certify that that's a right thing. It's only when those two perspectives align that we have laws that are just. So if you just have a divine authority saying what the laws are, that's not going to work because people aren't going to follow it. The same is true for the humanist philosophy. People aren't going to follow it. They aren't going to honor it. We have to agree in order for a law to be just. That's why you have two parties, because no one can agree. So that's pretty much it for the broken news and forming a third party and why it's not going to work and why we have two parties. And if you have any suggestions on how we can make this better, I'd love to hear them in the comments. So please leave those, and until next time, you guys, take care.